I will tell you is one that I really stumbled into how important it is with the screening of a film. I forget how many years ago, but the name of the film that I watched was Gen Silent, and it's a documentary about LGBT elders, and it is really powerful. It really opened my eyes to some of the challenges and opportunities we have in this space. And I'm delighted to share with you that it just so happens, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, there's going to be a screening of this film on June 30th this month at Temple Rodef Shalom. And I'm going to make sure to copy that into chat here. But I'm at this point, I'm really excited to welcome our panel members, Dan Stewart and Cody Christian, to the stage. And we will get to know them a little bit, and then we will dive into this important topic. So first off, welcome Dan and Cody. And before we dive into this topic, let's get to know the two of you a little bit better. And I know you've got a slide deck that's going to be able to guide us through this discussion. Dan, you want to go first?
Certainly. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Steve. My name is Dan Stewart. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Aging Equality Project for the Human Rights Campaign. I am a proud gerontologist who's worked in the field of aging for about 15 years now, and really work at the intersection of aging and ensuring access for minoritized older adults, specifically lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender older adults. So I've been doing the work with the Human Rights Campaign for about 5 years now, previously doing my work in Missouri. So happy to be here with a great audience, and also to bring along a provider from the field that I've been working with, Cody.
Yeah, and Cody, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. I was talking about positive aging community champions earlier, and Ingleside is one of the biggest supporters that we have at the positive aging community, the organization that you work with. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Ingleside.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cody Christian. I've been with Ingleside just over 8 years now, and I've held numerous roles. So I started off as the fitness manager, kind of in resident services, life enrichment. And then I had the opportunity, my organization let me complete my AIT, and I got my license as a nursing home administrator. So then I was the community director of healthcare services at our Rockville location, Ingleside at King Farm. And then from there, I am now with the parent corporation, Ingleside, and I'm the Director of Accreditation and Quality Improvement. I am also the chair of our Ingleside in Color, which is our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. I am also the co-chair of Leading Age Maryland DEIB work group as well. And I'm happy to be here today and have this conversation with you all.
I love it. All right. So Dan, I know we tested your slide deck, and how about I'll drop behind the curtain here and let you take it away. And whoops, and looks like we've got your slide deck there. So okay,
Good to go. Thank you so much. And Cody, I didn't realize that you started out in fitness. I started out in my career in aging as an activity coordinator. So definitely, I think there's something to having that on the ground experience than now to be at this role on a systems level. So we'll be hearing a little bit more about Cody and Ingleside's journey. I have a few slides just want to share about this tool, and then we'll dive into a deeper discussion. Again, my name is Dan Stewart. Excited to be here today to share with you a tool that was developed by two leading organizations. So the Long-Term Care Quality Index is a joint project between the Human Rights Campaign Foundation and SAGE. Human Rights Campaign Foundation is the nation's largest LGBTQ advocacy organization, and SAGE is the world's largest and oldest organization focused in on LGBTQ aging. Together in partnership with AARP Foundation, Archstone Foundation, and Ted Snowden, as well as our council of professionals in the field. We've developed this tool to share within the senior living industry and help them really change the landscape of inclusion in an operationalized way. So I wanted to give you all a little bit of a brief background on this community, a community that we're seeing more visibility of and diversifying of as well. You know, historically, we haven't had a lot of research when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity. And so estimates are thought to be on the lower end, but currently there's about 3 million individuals over the age of 50 who self-identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, LGBTQ+. As we know, as this population, as our aging population grows and diversifies, that also means in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity, seeing it nearly double by 2030, with 20% of folks identifying at the intersection of minority race as well. Now, when we talk about this population, I think it's important also to recognize the generational differences that exist. When we talk about the LGBTQ elders of today that may be seeking more intensive care, those of the oldest generation, we refer to those individuals as the invisible generation. These are folks that were born of a time in America where there was no public conversation about LGBTQ identities. There was no conversation, social perception, or much thought. It wasn't until many years later we see this next generation of older adults, those born of the silent generation, that came of age during times of discrimination, of medicalization and pathologizing of homosexuality as a mental illness. These are folks that grew up in a time of the McCarthy era, recognizing that identifying as LGBTQ could risk your job. And so grew up in a time where they may have been aware of their identities, but kept it silent. And lastly, what we're seeing now with those of the youngest generation of LGBTQ older folks are our Pride generation. And these are individuals who have been out for decades and have a strong desire to continue to be out. So even within this population, we're seeing shifts and changes in openness of identity and recognition of identity and greater conversation. Although that being said, we're seeing resilience in identity, we still recognize, and the research shows that there are some poor health outcomes, socioeconomic outcomes as well. With a population that's less likely to be partnered and less likely to have children, often LGBTQ elders have to rely on formalized care. But because of a history of stigma and discrimination, have a high hesitancy to access that care. 60% of LGBTQ elders, when interviewed by AARP Foundation, stated that they fear that they may experience harassment, denial of care, or lesser care, simply because of their identity if they were to access long-term care services. And because of this hesitancy to access care throughout a lifetime, we do see a higher likelihood of chronic illness and disease. So it's a population that is continuously growing, one that we're seeing individuals come out and be open, but at the same time, because of a history of hesitancy of accessing care, some additional burdens, individuals as they reach the later part of their years are needing additional assurance, concern, and care support. So recognizing this work and the work that we've done at the Human Rights Campaign for 17 years with the hospitals, with our Healthcare Equality Index, and 20 years with the corporations, with our Corporate Equality Index, we partnered with SAGE to bring a tool for the senior living industry. While there are a variety of care options, and home health is a big component and section of caring for people as they age, we recognize within the long-term care settings, there are policies and practices that we can really utilize to help inform and speak to those inclusive efforts. So I think one way to best show the impact is to share from the voices of the elders themselves. So here's just a brief review of what the Long-Term Care Quality Index is.
If you don't think you have lesbian,
gay,
bisexual,
and transgender people in your long-term care community,
think again.
Upward of 5% of your residents are members of the LGBTQ community.
we are living in your communities and may stay silent or in the closet.
Because we are afraid of discrimination.
that's not surprising since many of us have lived for decades under legal discrimination.
Discrimination that persists today. There are over 2.5 million LGBTQ people over the age of 50 living in America today.
Experts predict that by the year 2030,
Close to 7 million LGBTQ elders will be seeking care and services.
That's why it's more important than ever that long-term care communities like yours support us as we age.
And treat us with dignity and respect so that we won't be forced to go back into the closet.
And it is often more difficult for Black and Latinx members of our community.
Fear of inadequate care and discrimination are compounded by racism.
Across the country, LGBTQ elders are not getting the care and support we need to thrive.
Let's change that.
The Human Rights Campaign Foundation and SAGE believe
That most long-term care communities want LGBTQ elders to feel welcome and get the care they need.
And deserve.
And that's why the LEI exists.
the LEI helps long-term care communities adopt better policies so that they can provide culturally competent and responsive care to LGBTQ elders.
with your help, we can change the future.
Let's make sure that long-term care communities are welcoming and inclusive to LGBTQ elders like me.
And me.
And me.
And me.
And me.
Sign up for the Long-Term Care Equality Index today.
Prior to my work on the national level, I used to run a older adults group for LGBTQ elders in Missouri. And in constant conversation with our older adults, many of them believed they had to move out of state in order to find a welcoming space or environment. They had to hide their identities or pretend that their wife was their roommate in order to access care. We all understand the importance of aging in place, and for folks who need supportive services or want a more community-like environment, having access to those communities right in their backyard is so critical to ensuring that folks are able to age positively and successfully. So recognizing the support that we can provide communities is through the Long-Term Care Quality Index, which is a benchmarking tool and survey designed to help senior housing communities both assess their current services, policies, and practices, and assist them in adopting policies and practices that promote LGBTQ+ inclusion. As I stated, this is based on our 17-year success with about 1,000 hospitals across the US through our healthcare quality index. And the best practices that we've developed is really more of a menu of options. While long-term care is the name, it's a misnomer in that we are open to all senior living providers, which we'll go over shortly. But through participation in this free program with access to free webinars, technical assistance, and resources, organizations that participate in our survey that opens up next month and will be open for about 3 or 4 months will then be recognized in a national database and have the opportunity to achieve a tier of recognition, which will have an organization that did Ingleside speak just momentarily. Often in doing this work and speaking with LGBTQ elders themselves, their care partners, as well as professionals that support them, there's often this desire of, I wish there was a list of where we could go. How can I clarify or affirm that this community is safe? And this is the list created by the 2 largest LGBTQ orgs in the country. We're trusted voices within the community and recognize that we can be a bridge between the industries and help supporting them to ensure inclusion, not just for the residents, but also inclusion for their loved ones and your staff. Again, this is open to all senior living providers, those that are from skilled nursing, assisted living, independent living, also active adult, affordable housing, and freestanding hospice. Open to all organizations across the US and territories, including Puerto Rico, DC. In addition, we have a system survey tool where organizations are able to take rather individual surveys for each community. They're able to take a handful of surveys. We're very proud to have Watermark, United Church Homes, Human Good as some of our largest system sign-ons participating in this year's study. The criteria as a whole, as I stated, really tries to encapsulate what does inclusion look like in a community, not just for your residents, but also for the visitors, also for the staff, and how are you engaging with the outside community as well. In total, for our 2023 survey, we had 200 communities participate, We're very proud to say that we currently have about 400 communities signed up to take our LEI, next LEI survey, but we're looking to expand the network of providers that are taking the stand to say, we are inclusive, we are taking the steps. Inclusion is a journey and perfection is not expected. Again, we recognize just the wide variety of resources and different types of communities. Organizations know what's best in terms of their capacity. But we're here to able to give the templates, the best practices, the resources, tried and tested within the healthcare industry, hospitals specifically, as well as corporations, and sharing that knowledge and learned over nearly 20 years within this environment as well. I'd like now to bring up Cody Christian, who's the Director of Accreditation and Quality Improvement at Ingleside. I will say that I became aware of Ingleside. HRC, our headquarters are in the DC area. And I had the pleasure of one day just flipping through one of the local LGBTQ publications that comes in. You find them at the coffee shop. And there was a beautiful advertisement, an inclusive advertisement by Ingleside. And getting connected to them, hearing about the work that they're doing and how they've incorporated the LEI as part of that work has been a great leadership to see an example. So I'll go ahead and bring up Cody. I'll stop sharing my slides here on your screen, and we'll give you some links to follow later. There's an opportunity if you're interested in signing the Commitment to Caring Pledge or going to the lei.org to get started with that process. So I'll go ahead and stop my share. Thanks for being here, Cody, and giving a background on your journey with Ingleside. You know, I think what's very apparent through the website, through speaking to you and some of your other colleagues, and even just seeing photos from the community, is really this emphasis on culture and creating a culture of inclusion, creating one that embraces all the diversity of every resident, of their care partners, families, the staff, the greater community. Can you share a little bit about Ingleside's journey of how they started taking on diversity, equity, inclusion, outreach, that work, and what does that look like?
Yes, of course. I think it all starts looking at our core values. And it's one thing, most organizations obviously have their core values, but how do you live those out is the game changer. So for Ingleside, our core values, the acronym is ARISE. It's accountability, respect, innovation, stewardship, and excellence. And all of those can play a role when it comes into your DEIB or your inclusion journeys, especially the respect and trying to have essence of excellence. And how do you have excellence? It's by really building a culture within your organization of not just business success, but it's how do you provide top level care and services for your residents and your staff. And I like how you mentioned, just kind of in your introduction, is having that vision for all of your stakeholders. So your visitors, your family members, your partnerships with the community. So I think it all really originates from those core values. And then it's kind of the organization's continuous commitment. So as we know, DEIB and inclusion is really trendy right now. But like I said, I've been with Ingleside for over 8 years now. And the moment I walked in for my interview, the only way I can kind of state what I felt was like there was a spirit there. From the moment I walked through the door with the concierge, to the people who navigated me to where I was being interviewed, the interview process, there was some feeling there that it was kind of hard to explain. And after I was hired, people said, yes, the spirit of ICAF is what we said, because Ingleside at King Farm was kind of my home for the first number of years. And that's the difference there, is the felt, not only be included, but I felt that like belongingness right from the get-go. And that was before things really got formalized. Like, it was a part of our core values, but in the last number of years, it's like we need to be more intentional and concrete with our actions. And we've made a lot of strides there through different avenues. Inclusion and DEIB is part of our strategic plan, right? We are setting ourselves accountable to the work. So it's that commitment, not just that it's a program you have and that it's trendy that you're doing something about it. We're committing to it because it's part of our strategic plan. then that filters down into our affiliates or our communities in the DMV, into our operational plans and creating goals and objectives to, again, keep ourselves accountable to this difficult line of work that is very challenging. But without having that accountability as an organization, it's sometimes tough or easy to get sidetracked. So I would say the strategic plan, operation plan, I really wanted to kind of mention. And also kind of the other avenues of how the organization is committed beyond that, and some of the actions we have taken is all three of our CCRCs, so our three communities are Life Plan communities, continuing care resident communities, are SAGE Platinum certified. So that's a commitment in itself of the education and ongoing understanding of the various components of the LGBT community. And I do identify as a gay male. So when I first came into the community, I felt like I belonged. I felt safe, but that added step of the visibility of saying we are SAGE certified, I've been allowed to really lean into the openness in my role, and just being able to, again, educate, communicate things such as being kind of a champion in this effort. Along with SAGE, we have a few of our team members who have been certified as trainers through the Office of Human Rights under the Care of LGBT Seniors and Seniors with HIV Amendment Act. So again, an additional form of education, a different finite piece of the puzzle of working with those within that community. And then the creation of Ingleside in Color, our committee. I think it's ever evolving, right? The diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is not something that's like, okay, create a game plan and that's ABC and you're going to be successful and then you're done, check it off the list. It's something you always have to go back and reflect. It's a very vulnerable work that you have to do. So our Ingleside in Color committee, we have kind of our
I think we just lost your sound, unfortunately. Just reconnect. Well, I think that's just a great portrayal, Cody. You got back to us?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Please
All right,
continue.
great. So we have our parent committee, our DEIB committee, and then we have one at each of our communities. And this is where it aligns really beautifully with LEI, is like we have to have all stakeholders involved in the efforts. So it's not just the corporate partnership designing this, because we have a perspective, we have an understanding. I feel like I know a good amount, but I only know pieces of my lived experience and my education. So getting the perspective of residents, family members, and leadership in mid-level management and frontline. So we have a couple different avenues that we do our work through. And part of that also is partnering with experts in the field. You do not need to know everything, and the roadmap of LEI is so beneficial. But Ingleside has also partnered with contractors to come and do specialized education, listening sessions, where they don't necessarily have leadership of the community, where people can, again, we want people to be authentic, vulnerable. We have to make sure everyone's voice is heard, and we have to set up spaces where they feel comfortable to do so. And part of that work is, again, continuous accountability. So having a charter, having objectives within your committee. We are really big on strategy here, even though this work is a little bit tough to really strategize fully. It again gives us a little bit of direction, which is really helpful. And it aligns with the last two things I'll mention is we are CARF accredited communities as well. So if you're not familiar with CARF, it's the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities. And all three of our communities are accredited in aging services as a CCRC. And part of their standards of practice that they survey on is your commitment, and that you have a DEIB plan written out. And what does that mean for your organization? And then they review to see how are you living it out. So again, just all these different avenues that shows our commitment to really the end all is person-centered care, right? And this can, again, isn't necessarily just the residents, but it's how do we integrate and adapt our operation per the individual, because everyone is unique, and we need to respect their uniqueness. I shared a lot, but there's a lot of different things that Ingleside has done over the last couple of years, and it's really ramped up. And it's really exciting stuff that Ingleside is doing right now around the inclusion work.
Thank you so much, Cody. I think you give a really good insight into really the process that you all took through really what is our mission, what are our values, how do this align in these actions of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. How are they integrated, not just in a, let's put it on paper 5-year plan, but really into how we function as an organization. And I think you're at a key role where it is that, how do we validate? How do we really ensure that we're walking the talk that we're doing? And, you also made mention of having individuals that are trained in LGBTQ aging. So I believe most of your properties are under a LGBTQ senior bill of rights. And we're actually seeing more states take on LGBTQ bill of rights, specifically looking at educating providers and ensuring that there are protections for LGBTQ individuals. DC has one, California, New Jersey, New York. We're seeing progress with this. And one of those components is that training and ensuring that folks are trained. A lot of the best practices in the LEI are based on these LGBTQ senior bill of rights. So by following the regulations and things of that sort, organizations should do well on principle, but then have the opportunity then to show all the other additional growth. Really happy to hear about the Ingleside in Color, and really, as you stated, the approach of having not just on the system level, but really making sure that folks on the community level feel engaged and are bought in. Steve, I'd love to bring you on up and have a conversation with the three of us, see if there's any
I love it.
questions.
And we had a great question from Diane, and I was able to do a little ChatGPT search, and her question was, I know DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, but what's DEIB? And I learned that the B is belonging, but do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Cody, do you want to speak to that? Because I'm sure that was also maybe a newer addition in the latest years.
That's a great question, and I think it's a very important question. It is something that's been added more recently, I would say. So diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And the key difference there is, take in perspective of yourself. Have you ever been included in a meeting but felt like you didn't belong there or didn't have there? Right? So you can be included as much as you want, but if you don't sense, you're in school, you're in the workplace, but do you belong there? It's a much higher ask to get to the belonging piece, but that kind of needs to be the end goal. So that's why a lot of people are saying it's not enough just to be included. We need to make belonging more visible. So that's why the B has been added for a lot of organizations or work groups that are doing efforts.
And I will say I'm seeing more embracing of this in the aging field, because we recognize the importance of person-centered care, of really seeing the full personhood and autonomy in a society that often is very ageist. So I've really appreciated that, and thank you for making that. I think that was such a great metaphor, Cody, of being included in a meeting, but not necessarily feeling like you have an option to have a voice or are really welcomed.
So one of the things that I'm going to share my screen here because I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper to two things that you all are talking about. First, we've got the long-term care equality index, and I copied this website into chat, and it'll be on the recording link. But when you get to this page, you can do a location search here, and just for purposes, since most of our folks in our community are in the Washington, D.C. metro area, I'll do it, let's say 50 miles around the Northern Virginia here. And what you see is that we've got a list of 9 results that are in this community search. Edenwald, the Ingleside King Farm, Rock Creek, the Landing in Alexandria, the Providence, Seneca and Rockville, Westminster, Lake Ridge, Skybridge, and Levendale Hebrew Geriatric. But Dan, tell us a little bit about like what this means. Like if Ingleside at King Farm is a high performer and listed on these results. And then I'd like to dive into, I've also got the Sage website pulled up and we can do the same thing.
So this is one of our most popular features with all of our quality indices is we really straddle the land between helping providers, systems update their policies inclusion, but then also communicate who's doing the good work, who's doing this, making these efforts. And so with our searchable database, we'll also on our website be having a searchable map as well. Really outlines with folks and through clicking through those profiles, showing what policies they do or do not have, as well as the links to their websites, their address. But those designations of builder, high performer, and leader really indicate that one, these organizations have protections for employees, visitors, and residents in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity. Very critical. We are currently in a country that has half of our states without these protections. And really serve as a way to uplift. We are able to really build branding opportunities, press releases, things of that sort, because a key component is also helping the LGBTQ community know their options and know this great work. And I must say, really what we're seeing from our elders is folks even just attempting not necessarily perfection is assumed. And I think Cody spoke to a lot of important pieces where you can have the feeling, you can have the support, but then taking that next step forward in terms of formalizing and really sustaining those policy changes and training folks on them can really be beneficial.
Great. Okay. Well, here, I'm going to go back.
I can speak a little bit to Sage Care as well, which I think you're going to pull up as well.
Yeah. So I've got the Sage Care website, which you can access from the Sage website, but the Sage Care website is again has a similar search tool. Find a Sage Care provider near you, and I haven't done this yet, so I hope it works out. But we'll do a similar search. Actually, here, why don't I just I'll do Maryland. I'll just search by a state, and I go search provider, and then. Hopefully, okay, 39 results found. And here we've got a multitude of providers extending beyond just housing. We've got Aging Well Elder Care and Aging Life Care Management Practice, Holy Cross Health Partners, Ingleside's there, Sunrise, the Wesley at Home, a continuing care at home program. So, and then this has different credential, platinum credential, and this is great. We've got senior centers that have been through this certification. So maybe talk a little bit about what this certification means.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the logistics, and then Cody, if you want to talk about how it's played out in your communities. But Sage Care is a credentialing program developed by Sage, the oldest, largest organization focused on LGBTQ aging, really the experts in this realm, and are able to train staff across the age care spectrum. And as you saw within their searchable database, has a nice variety of different providers that have gone trainings. The initial credential is about 50% of staff have undergone a certain amount of LGBTQ access to trainings, as well as trainers and technical assistants. Organizations that are Sage Care certified actually receive credit within the LEI in terms of their training, and there's some reciprocity there. But Cody, I'd love to hear your experience at seeing it play out in Ingleside and how it changed things.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely evolved a little bit. I see them just a really a great addition to the education platform because they're a resource, right? The more resources you can have of people who are experts in that area, the better. Um, Even as someone who is part of the LGBT community, I continuously learn, and they're a part of that education for myself, which is just great. So as you mentioned, all three of our communities, Ingleside at King Farm, Ingleside at Rock Creek, and Westminster at Lake Ridge, have for a number of years now, I think since 2015 or 16, something around there, are platinum certified, so hitting that 80% benchmark. But again, the goal is 100%, right? We want everyone to have an understanding that this is part of our community. This is a commitment and an expectation of working in our community, and setting them up and giving them the key is like giving them tools on how to navigate within their position to be respectful and engaging appropriately with people who may be part of the community. So we've at Ingleside have kind of expanded a little bit. A lot of their education is through virtual education. The initial onboard, we had trainers come out and do some in-person work. Now it's kind of virtual education. But here at Ingleside, we sometimes do a partnership where I'll come and speak along with that, get the perspective of someone who is part of the community or leading the charge or who have been in the organization for a few years and how it's evolved. The open dialect and Q&A off of the education is really powerful. So yeah, Sage is great. I highly recommend anyone who's thinking about getting certified to do that.
All right. Man, we've covered a lot of ground here, and these are great resources for folks that may be looking for providers, or they're helping their loved ones find providers. And, I know I'm going to botch this, but I want to go back to the Jen Silent film, because when I saw this film, it just opened my eyes to a complete blind spot for me as a straight male. Okay. But what I think the tagline in the film is a generation that has now been able to come out of the closet are going back in the closet due to elder care. And some of the stories that are documented in this film, talks about a couple where a gentleman was going into a nursing home and the nurse was sort of praying the gay out of him, and then not feeling comfortable, like massaging his partner's hands, when a staff came into the room. It's something that would be very natural. If I was sitting in a hospital room and massaging my wife's hands, nobody would think anything of it. And really just, number one, caregiving and elder care is so challenging anyways, but to add this extra layer of discrimination or what have you on it, the film really opened my eyes to that. Out of curiosity, I would love to know if either of you have encountered elders that have faced this, but then also, especially Cody, some of the positive stories maybe of residents at some of your communities. I'm babbling here.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that film, and I'm really glad that there's an opportunity for folks to see it in person. This film is almost 11 years old, but I must say it's as impactful as it was when it was released, and unfortunately, it's covering a lot of the issues that are still around. I think it helps make it that much more salient. Prior to my working with more system levels on the national level, I worked with a lot of elders in Missouri, which isn't necessarily the most progressive in terms of LGBTQ inclusion policies on a state level. And so, as I shared earlier, many folks thought that they had to move or leave. There actually was a federal lawsuit against one of the long-term care communities with a lesbian couple being denied being able to share a room together, even though they were legally married. Thankfully, now years later, it's since been settled. But that being said, those elders in that moment had nowhere else to go. And when there was a health emergency, it really then relied on a matter of who knows what social worker where that can help and assure inclusion based on just relationships and word of mouth. And that's often how the LGBTQ community and other marginalized populations have been. It's who do you know, using that versus being able to really rely on institutions to outwardly say they're supportive or take those steps. But thankfully, we're seeing a lot of progress. I will share one example from one of our communities that participates in the LEI, and I think expands why we're doing inclusion, where it wasn't an LGBTQ elder themselves. It was a straight woman, but she had LGBTQ adult children that were her primary caregivers. And she purposely left her community because her children didn't feel welcomed to come and visit her. And so she purposely sought out an LGBTQ inclusive community, not just for herself, because again, she was a straight person, but to know that in her home, her family and children would be invited and welcome as they were was so critical. And I think we're going to start seeing more of that as well, where consumers are going to be looking for more, engaging, active, as well as inclusive environments when we start to think about people and their longevity and in connection to others as well.
Yep. Cody, yeah, any insights on families or individuals in your Ingleside properties?
Sure. Yeah, I think transparently, we don't have a ton of LGBT residents, but we look at it as holistic, all of our stakeholders. So we've had similar situations where not so much residents leaving our community, but being grateful that as children or relatives, feeling that accepted nature when they're coming into their community with their spouse, with their partner, and feeling like they can just be their authentic selves. And it does make a big difference in the quality of life for the residents, and because family and connection is important. And if those people coming in that provide that to you or who are a part of that don't feel that, then it's going to limit the amount of joy that that resident may have. One success story that I've had kind of published in Blade a few years ago was right when I got to Ingleside, there was two gentlemen who had been together for many, many years. And they actually, because of the again, the spirit of Ingleside at King Farm and the sense and the love and support in the community, they actually, during their time here, got married and had the reception in our community. And did 100% of the residents support or come and celebrate? No, but they respected it, right? That's one thing. You're not going to get everyone to maybe change their views on something, but establishing a culture of respect can do a lot. And then you can still celebrate with those that do want to be a part of that. So lots of good stuff like that. That's a story that will stay with me for the rest of my life for sure.
That is great. And Cody, at some point when you were talking, you talked about being an employee of an organization that embraces inclusivity, that was a real appealing thing for your from the perspective. And I can certainly see that. I mean, quite frankly, what ageism, which is something we talk about a lot on this platform, employee and employer ageism is what most of us fear, is that, oh geez, I'm going to be, asked to leave because of my age. And then I can obviously see where LGBTQ could be even amplified, that form of discrimination or fear of that discrimination. And being with an organization that's made a commitment in this area is probably really good. So Dan, so for those that are listening or are watching the recording, like, how can people get involved with the Long-Term Care Equality Index? Like, what are some of the next steps?
Well, I welcome folks to check out our website, thelei.org, to sign the Commitment to Caring Pledge. Our survey opens up in July and is open for about 4 months. During that time, you'll have the opportunity to review your policies if you want feedback, things of that sort. And then after, as we review, I'll have opportunities to update your policies as well. But really, the survey in and of itself is the tool. And again, an opportunity for organizations to be uplifted in their participation for supporting not just the residents. And I appreciate you, Steve, bringing up Cody's story, because I think it's such an important story of recognize also the opportunity and growth that you can see when people are affirmed in their environment, where you started out in fitness and through feeling comfortable and supportive in your environment, now we're at a director level in leadership in the organization. So I think, you know, as we see the great resignation or people, you know, leaving this realm, and we think about what are ways that we can keep people and stay, and culture seems to be one of the big pieces that are important to people in a work environment.
And is there a cost involved in being in on this initiative?
No, there's no cost at all. Our work is funded through AARP Foundation, Archstone,
Wow.
Lieutenant Snowden.
So there's really no barrier for any community in the country to jump on this, correct?
Right. And I think, you know, especially this is one of our youngest indices where we can offer more technical support, and compared to the thousands of hospitals we work with now in the healthcare quality field. But we do anticipate it growing. And I think, you know, especially with the partnership between HRC and SAGE, can really help folks know what's on the top line level important aspects to have integrated in your community.
Excellent. Okay. And then let's see, we've got Kina on the discussion, and she shared, here's another survey from a collective of LGBTQ elder care providers led by the Stonewall Community Development Corp. Are you familiar with that initiative?
No, this is great. Thank you, Kina. So with the LEI, we're really looking at the policies and practices and less about folks' opinions or views. So I think this is like a nice complement. And I also will say, as much as it's a taxing process, we validate everything. So nothing is based on self-report. We look at the policies. We want to see the photo of it posted in your break room. You know, send us your slides. We'll give you feedback. So this is yeah, so great effort. And
this is great, Kina. Thanks for sharing that. And I'll make sure that that's on our recording link too. Diane says, I'm delighted to be a resident at Goodwin House, Bailey's Crossword, where my wife and I are welcome and known, as are other couples. Geez, I was kind of tearing up there reading that. This is beautiful, Diane. For at least 4 years, Goodwin House, Bailey's Crossword has sponsored an on-campus pride parade with signs, temporary tattoos. That's wonderful.
And they are a participant in the LEI, so that's really wonderful to hear.
And then Lejeune Marbury, friend of mine, she asked, Dan and Cody, are you available for direct collaboration with senior living communities?
Yeah, please feel free to reach out.
Okay, and I'll make sure that their emails are at our link. So this is really great. So now the SAGE certification, and Cody talked about CARF. Those are there's fees sometimes involved with certifications like that, but this LEI, the fact that it's free, it's funded by outside sources. You don't need to have LGBTQ residents or employees currently in your organization. This is going to help you create that platform and framework. And as I'm thinking about it, with the labor shortages that we have, not only in every industry, but in this senior living industry, and recruiting young people to our field, I almost think that this is paramount that our providers, at a minimum, join in on this. So I'm really going to help beat the drum. There's really no excuse for anybody, and the commitment, like how much is involved in when you fill out the survey?
The survey takes, we find that the survey is best filled out by a committee, just because you'll need, you know, some touch points in HR, maybe some folks from nursing in terms of who has access to those policies. But it really depends on which practices you have. The more practices you have, the more things we'll ask to upload. But then it's a really great opportunity also to show off the great photos at Pride events, and then we're able to post that online and through our reports as well.
And Diane, as I'm like looking at your comment about you and your wife and living in a senior living community, the interesting thing is how I met Dan and why we're doing this discussion was another LGBTQ discussion that we had where Dan shared the LEI, and I was like, whoa, we've got to spotlight that. But Diane, man, I tell you, I would love in the future to potentially spotlight you and your wife and other real life stories of elders who are living in communities or using providers that identify as LGBTQ. And again, forgive my language. I recognize I may be doing some botching of some things here. So man, well, I'm looking at the clock. We have burned through almost an hour here. This has been fascinating and wonderful. Dan and Cody, anything that we didn't cover that you feel like we should address?
I just want to wish everyone a happy June, happy Pride Month, happy summer. Really, I want to thank you all for taking the time and really recognizing that even just having this conversation is so much more progress than a lot of our elders have seen. And, you know, I think we all deserve to age with dignity and respect, regardless of who we love, who we are, or where we live. And, you know, participating in the LEI, Sage Care, engaging in these practices is a way to bring that up as a reality.
I love it.
And I would just say,
yeah.
I know at the forefront, I mentioned all of the different avenues and certifications that Ingleside has, but I cannot promote LEI enough. The holistic nature of it and how it goes from marketing to policies to programming. It's just so well designed where it really hits. If you really want to make a change in your organization, there's your roadmap right there. And you have resources to help kind of guide you there, and you receive feedback. I was very impressed. It took work to consolidate it all for the certification. And there's certain things that we didn't have in place, but that prompted critical conversations then. So it's really such a great tool. So I would just say that. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is DEIB work is difficult. It is difficult. You're going to hit a lot of barriers in your work, but a lot of people are scared to take that first step because they're scared of failure. And the reality is you are going to fail a lot on your DEIB journey or have to adapt how you navigate things. Little steps makes a big difference. Just like Dan said, just having this conversation, huge. So just keep pushing through. Little victories are something to be proud of, and keep it's very purposeful work. So
I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great hour, and thanks everybody who participated in this discussion. I will get this recording up at proaging.com as quickly as possible, because this is the type of recording where I think it's something that can be shared, you know, and hey, did you watch this or what have you? But I'm really going to help beat the drum for the index, because I would love to see the providers that are in our orbit, all of them participating. There's no reason not to. All right. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you soon.